Andrew Morrison thought he was just stopping by one of his luxury hotels, until two little girls with familiar green eyes made him question everything he thought he left behind. Andrew Morrison's morning had started like any other, with precision, silence, and a mental checklist that left no space for error. The air was brisk as his driver pulled up to the front of one of his boutique hotels, a sleek, modern property with mirrored windows and granite columns that reflected his name, his power, and his expectations. He stepped out of the car, briefcase in one hand, already thinking about the first boardroom call he had scheduled in 42 minutes. He didn't see the girls right away. He only heard something that didn't belong in his world, soft crying, muffled but close, just around the corner of the entrance. He stopped mid-step. He hated interruptions. But something about the sound, fragile, frightened, made him turn. There, near the edge of the front window, sitting on the cold concrete beneath the towering glass facade, were two small girls. They were huddled close together, arms wrapped tightly around each other's shoulders, identical in every way. Their auburn hair curled in loose waves, cascading over pastel jackets stained with dirt. Their green eyes, wide and glistening with tears, met his for just a second before the younger one buried her face in her sister's shoulder. Andrew's first instinct was to call security, let them handle it, and move on with his day. But he didn't. Instead, he walked slowly toward them, crouching a few feet away, lowering himself so he wouldn't tower over them. He noticed their tiny shoes, untied and scuffed, and the way their small hands trembled as they held onto each other. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice softer than he was used to using, the words almost unfamiliar in his mouth. The older girl nodded. Her chin quivered, but she didn't look away. "We were with Mommy," she said quietly. "But then there were too many people. We couldn't find her anymore." Andrew blinked. She couldn't have been more than 5. Her sister may be by minutes younger, but just as small, just as vulnerable. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emmy," the girl replied. "And this is Lily." The second girl peeked out, eyes still red and fearful. Andrew looked around. No adult nearby. No frantic parent searching. He tapped his watch out of habit but didn't check the time. Something inside him had already shifted. He extended a hand and said, "Come inside with me. It's warm, and we'll find your mom." Emmy hesitated, then took his hand with a grip much stronger than he expected from someone her size. Lily followed closely, still clutching her sister's sleeve. As the doors of the hotel slid open and the warm air embraced them, Andrew realized something he wouldn't be able to explain later. The moment their tiny hands reached for his, everything else, his schedule, his image, his plans, blurred at the edges. He had no idea who these girls were or how they'd wandered into his world, but he knew, with startling clarity, that they were about to change it. Inside the lobby, the shift from cold pavement to warmth was immediate. The marble floor beneath their feet gleamed, the scent of fresh flowers and polished wood lingering in the air. Guests moved in and out, their footsteps quick, eyes focused elsewhere, unaware of the quiet moment unfolding near the entrance. Andrew guided the girls to one of the plush velvet armchairs near the fireplace, motioning for the concierge to bring water and something warm for them to eat. Without being told, the staff moved with silent efficiency, glancing at the children with concern but not questions. Andrew was known for his decisiveness, and no one dared interrupt his actions now. Emmy sat down first, carefully helping Lily up beside her. She didn't let go of her sister's hand. Their small legs barely dangled over the edge of the chair, shoes tapping against the frame as they shifted nervously. Andrew pulled over another chair and sat across from them, trying to soften his tone, which was naturally clipped and assertive. "Do you remember your mom's phone number?" he asked. Emmy shook her head. "She said we were going shopping. We went to a place with a lot of windows. Then she turned and we couldn't see her." Her lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry again. There was a kind of quiet strength in her voice that caught him off guard. Lily finally spoke, her voice so soft it was barely audible. "She said if we ever get lost, find a person who looks like they know where they're going. Her eyes rose to meet Andrew's, and he blinked, surprised. And you look like that, she added. He didn't know what to say. In his world, people rarely spoke to him like that, without calculation, without agenda. Children, he realized, didn't care about title or power. They responded to presence. And right now, he was the only one present for them. The concierge returned with hot cocoa, croissants, and a warm blanket. Emmy took the cup with both hands, whispering thank you. Lily followed her lead, still watching Andrew with curiosity. As they began to eat, their small hands steadying and their faces relaxing just slightly, he stood up and spoke quietly to the front desk manager. Call the local police. Let them know we found 2 lost children. And notify security to review all lobby and exterior footage. I want to find their mother. When he returned to his seat, Emmy looked at him and asked, Are you the boss here? Andrew gave a short nod. Something like that. She tilted her head. My mom said the man who owns this place has green eyes and a serious face. She said he's important but doesn't like people very much. Andrew blinked again, caught off guard. Did she say anything else? He asked slowly. Emmy thought for a second. Just that she used to know him. A long time ago. Something cold and sharp pricked beneath his ribs, though the room was warm. He hadn't heard those words, not like that, in years. He studied the girls again. Those green eyes, that shade of auburn. They weren't just familiar. They were unmistakable. But it couldn't be, he told himself. It wasn't possible. Still, his pulse shifted, his mind racing through names and faces from a lifetime ago. The moment he had heard their mother described, the way she had spoken of him, the way these girls looked, it all began to gather into something undeniable. He didn't yet know the full story, but something in his chest tightened with the certainty that this wasn't just a chance encounter. For the first time in years, Andrew Morrison felt the ground beneath him begin to move. And he didn't want to stop it. While the girls finished their cocoa, Andrew stood near the tall windows of the lobby, watching the sidewalk as if expecting someone to appear from the crowd with open arms and answers. He was trying to remain composed, but his thoughts spun faster than he could control. The pieces didn't just feel familiar, they fit too easily. He hadn't thought about Marina in years, at least not consciously. But now her name hovered in his mind, impossible to shake. He remembered her laughter, her fiery hair, the sharpness in her eyes when she was angry, the softness in her voice when she whispered things no one else ever heard. They had parted on tense terms, their final argument punctuated by his ambition and her silence. He had never imagined their paths crossing again. Behind him, the girls' soft voices broke through the tension. They were whispering to each other, huddled close like kittens in a storm. Emmy had taken off her jacket, draping it over Lily's shoulders. The gesture, simple and protective, twisted something deep in Andrew's chest. He couldn't shake the sense that he should have known them sooner, that he had already lost too much time. Security came by with footage from the entrance, pausing the video on the girls arriving alone from the street. No woman appeared behind them. Andrew scanned the screen twice, then ordered the team to expand the search radius. If their mother had been nearby, she was gone now. 10 minutes later, the front desk called out his name. A woman had arrived, out of breath and red-faced, asking about 2 little girls. Andrew turned toward the sound with a strange mix of dread and hope. He stepped into the hallway just as the woman walked in from the street. The moment he saw her, he froze. The red curls, slightly wind-blown and damp from cold air, the way she clutched her coat too tightly, and the unmistakable flash of those same green eyes, older now, more tired, but still hers. Marina. She saw him too. Her steps slowed, her breath caught, and her expression shifted from panic to disbelief. She didn't speak right away, and neither did he. It was as if the air between them had thickened, locking them both in a moment neither had prepared for. She looked past him and gasped when she saw the girls. They cried out together, "Mommy," and ran toward her. Marina dropped to her knees, pulling them into her arms, holding them with a desperation that said she'd been holding herself together just long enough to find them. Andrew stayed still, watching the scene, unsure if he belonged in it. But when Marina finally looked up at him, her eyes full of tears and 100 unspoken thoughts, something inside him gave way. "Marina," he said quietly. "It's you." She nodded, brushing hair from Emmy's forehead. "It's been a long time," she whispered. "I didn't expect this. Any of this." He wanted to ask 100 questions, but the girls were clinging to her, and the moment was fragile. Instead, he offered the one truth he could say out loud. "They look just like you. But their eyes, they're mine." Marina didn't answer right away. Then she gave the smallest nod. "Yes. They are." And just like that, the world shifted again, because everything that had felt like coincidence now made terrifying, beautiful sense. They sat together in a quiet corner of the hotel lounge, far from the bustle of check-ins and conference calls. The girls, now calm, nestled between Marina on the couch, their small bodies pressed against her sides as if trying to make sure she wouldn't disappear again. Andrew sat across from them, his posture rigid, his hands folded tightly in his lap, but his eyes couldn't stop moving, from Marina's face to the children, to the pendant around Emmy's neck, and back again. He didn't know what he expected to feel. Anger. Betrayal. Maybe even relief. But what settled into his chest was a slow, heavy ache for the time he hadn't even realized he'd lost. Marina looked different, and not just because years had passed. There was something in the way she held her daughters, something strong and exhausted at the same time. Her fire hadn't gone out, but it had learned to burn quietly. He could see it in the lines around her eyes, in the way her jaw tightened every time she looked at him and then looked away. She was the same woman he had once loved so fiercely, and the same woman he had walked away from without ever looking back. When the girls were distracted with a toy from the hotel gift shop, Andrew finally asked the question that had been clawing at him since he first saw their eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marina exhaled, not with frustration, but with the fatigue of someone who had rehearsed this moment alone in her head for too many years. "I tried," she said. "Twice. I wrote you. The letters came back unopened. Then I thought about calling, but I'd seen the news articles, the interviews. You were everywhere, and still nowhere. I didn't want to be the person who dragged you back into something you'd clearly left behind." Andrew's throat tightened. He remembered how focused he'd been back then, how ruthlessly he'd cut out every distraction. Marina hadn't been a distraction, she'd been the center of his world, but he hadn't known how to keep her and keep his momentum. He had chosen ambition over connection, and now he was staring into the eyes of two little girls who had grown up without knowing his name. "You should have tried harder," he said softly, more to himself than to her. She didn't argue. Instead, she said, "Maybe. But I didn't want to beg. And I didn't want them to ever feel like they weren't wanted." The words hit him like a blow. He looked at the twins, now laughing quietly together, as if their world had just clicked back into place. "I would have wanted them," he said. "If I had known." Marina nodded. "And now you do." The silence stretched between them again, filled with years they couldn't get back. But then Emmy turned around and held out a drawing, a stick figure family with 3 people and a 4th just barely added, his suit drawn in with a green crayon. "That's you," she said. "You're new, but you can stay." Andrew took the paper with a trembling hand. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was an invitation. And he realized, for the first time in his life, he wanted nothing more than to accept. The next morning, everything felt different. The world outside was the same city, the same skyline, the same early buzz of traffic, but inside Andrew's suite, something had shifted in a way he couldn't ignore. He had offered to let Marina and the girls stay the night in one of the adjoining rooms, insisting it was safer and simpler while they figured out what came next. Surprisingly, Marina had agreed. Maybe because the girls refused to leave his side. Maybe because she hadn't had the strength to argue after the long and emotional day. Or maybe, somewhere deep inside, she wanted to see what it looked like when he stayed. Andrew barely slept. He had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, reliving every detail of the last 24 hours. The weight of it all didn't overwhelm him, it sobered him. For the first time, he had a reason to stop thinking about profit margins and quarterly forecasts. 2 reasons, really. And one he'd never truly let go of. When morning came, he found Marina already awake, seated near the window with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, and her eyes were on the skyline, though he doubted she was really seeing it. He greeted her quietly, not wanting to startle her, and she turned slowly, offering him a faint but genuine smile. "They're still asleep," she said. "They kept waking up during the night, afraid I'd vanish again." Andrew nodded, understanding more than he expected to. "I didn't sleep much either." They didn't speak for a while after that. There was a tenderness in the silence, not awkward, but cautious, like both of them were learning how to be near each other again without unraveling. Eventually, he asked what had been sitting at the edge of his mind all morning. "What happens now?" Marina lowered her gaze. "That depends. I don't expect anything from you, Andrew. They don't even really know who you are yet. They know you helped. They feel safe with you. But I haven't told them the rest. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to." He stepped closer, folding his arms not out of defensiveness but as a way to steady himself. "I want to. I want them to know. And I want to be in their lives, if you'll let me." She looked at him for a long moment, reading his face with the same instinct she used to have years ago. Then she asked softly, "Are you sure you're not just reacting? That this isn't guilt or obligation?" Her question was fair. He would have asked the same thing if their roles were reversed. But when he answered, there was no hesitation in his voice. "I've built everything around control and distance. I told myself that was strength. But yesterday, it wasn't guilt. It wasn't duty. It was clarity. I looked into their eyes and saw myself. Not just physically. I saw how much I've missed. I don't want to run anymore. I want to earn the chance to be their father, even if it takes time." Something in Marina's expression softened. She placed the coffee cup on the table and nodded slowly. "Then we take it one step at a time." That day, they told the girls the truth. Carefully. Gently. Marina explained first, starting with memories of a man she once loved, and how sometimes grown-ups make choices they later regret. Andrew sat beside her, silent until Emmy asked him directly, "So you're our dad?" He looked at both girls, his heart pounding, and said, "Yes. I didn't know before, but now I do. And if it's okay with you, I'd really like to be part of your life." Lily blinked, her green eyes wide. "Can we still live with Mommy?" He smiled, eyes damp. "Of course. Nothing has to change today. I just want to be around more. Help when I can. Learn who you are." There were no tears, no dramatic embrace. Just 2 little girls scooting closer and climbing into his lap as if they had done it 100 times. In that quiet, simple moment, Andrew felt something begin to mend inside him. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time in years, real was enough. The weeks that followed moved more gently than Andrew expected. There were no sudden declarations or dramatic gestures, just a quiet rhythm forming day by day between him, Marina, and the girls. He had imagined this process might be more like a negotiation, filled with uncertainty and tension, but it unfolded instead like something fragile learning how to breathe. Andrew didn't try to rush his way into their lives. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he controlled. He showed up when he said he would, stayed when it mattered, and slowly, the girls began to trust that he wasn't going anywhere. Every Sunday afternoon became theirs. Emmy loved visiting the botanical gardens, especially the greenhouse with the butterflies that landed on her sleeves. Lily preferred the science museum, especially the earthquake simulator that she insisted on testing multiple times with a nervous but proud grin. Andrew drove them, carried their jackets, answered their questions, and found himself laughing more in a single day than he used to in a month. He bought them ice cream even when it was cold, took photos of them until his phone ran out of storage, and memorized the tiny differences in their voices when they told him stories. At night, he often replayed those moments in his mind, wondering how he'd ever been content without them. Work didn't disappear, but its place in his life changed. He started saying no to late dinners and red-eye flights. He moved meetings to early mornings so he could be free in the evenings. His assistant was baffled but respectful, and when asked why, Andrew simply replied, "I have more important meetings now." Marina watched it all with cautious optimism. She didn't fall back into old rhythms easily, she was still protective, still aware of how fast trust could be broken. But she also didn't pull away. When Andrew picked the girls up from school, she'd invite him in for coffee. When they had to coordinate schedules, she didn't speak through gritted teeth anymore. One evening, when Lily scraped her knee at the playground, it was Andrew who carried her home, and Marina didn't object. She just looked at him with a new softness that hadn't been there before. The turning point came on a quiet Wednesday evening. The girls had been drawing in the living room while Marina cooked dinner. Andrew had arrived early, and instead of heading straight into conversation, he sat on the floor beside them and asked what they were working on. Emmy handed him a picture, 4 figures standing in front of a tall building with a sun in the corner and a dog that didn't exist but apparently was now part of their family. Each person was labeled Mommy, Lily, Emmy. And under the tallest figure, in clumsy handwriting, it said Daddy. He stared at the drawing for a long moment, not knowing if he should say something. But before he could, Lily crawled into his lap and said, "That's you. Because you stay." He hadn't cried in years, not even during breakups or funerals. But in that moment, he felt the tears come without shame. Marina entered the room just then, towel in hand, and stopped when she saw the scene. She didn't speak, but their eyes met, and this time she didn't look away. Later that night, as they stood together by the door, she handed him a folded note. It wasn't dramatic, just a few sentences scribbled in her familiar handwriting. "I was scared to let you in again. But you've shown up in ways I never expected. I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm willing to find out. For them. For us." Andrew held on to that note for a long time after she closed the door. Not as a promise or a guarantee, but as a sign that maybe, just maybe, something broken had begun to heal. And he wasn't going to let it break again. As spring settled into the city, life with the girls became less of a new routine and more of a permanent rhythm. Andrew no longer questioned his role. He no longer second-guessed his decisions around them or worried whether he was doing too much or not enough. He had learned the difference between being present and just being around. The girls noticed it too. They didn't ask anymore if he was coming back the next day. They knew. When he said, "See you tomorrow," it meant something now. It meant they could count on it. It meant he wasn't just a name or a face from a picture they were never allowed to ask about. He was their father, and that truth had rooted itself into every quiet moment they shared. Marina had started to open up in ways Andrew hadn't expected. They still kept things slow, careful, but there was a trust between them now, one that didn't require endless discussions or defenses. She would call him sometimes just to share something funny the girls had said, or ask for help picking out new shoes for their growing feet, or invite him to stay for dinner after a long day. The barriers she'd built for protection had begun to shift. Not disappear completely, but bend in his direction. He never pushed. He knew what it had taken for her to raise them alone, to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. And now that he was part of that world, he respected every step that brought them here. One evening, while the girls were asleep upstairs, Marina and Andrew sat together on her small balcony overlooking the neighborhood. It wasn't the luxury he was used to, but it felt more like home than any of the penthouses he'd ever lived in. The air was crisp, and the scent of blooming trees carried between them in the silence. Marina handed him a cup of tea and leaned back in her chair. "You're different," she said, not looking at him. "Not just with them. With everything." He didn't answer right away, unsure how to put it into words. Finally, he said, "They changed the way I see everything. I thought I had to be someone cold to be strong. I thought being a provider was enough. But I was building a life that no one could belong to. Not even me." Marina smiled a little, still not meeting his gaze. "I used to wonder how someone could love so deeply and still walk away. But I don't wonder anymore. I see now that you didn't know how to stay. And now you do." He felt her words settle over him like a quiet forgiveness. He didn't ask for it, didn't expect it, but the weight it lifted surprised him. He looked at her, not as someone trying to reclaim the past, but as someone finally grounded in the present. They talked for another hour, not about heavy things, but about the girls, the chaos of birthday plans, the question of whether Lily would finally stop sleeping with a nightlight. They laughed more than they cried. And when he stood to leave, Marina walked him to the door. For a moment, they stood too close, saying nothing. Then she said, almost shyly, "They told me last night they want you to come to the school play next month. Emmy says you're the only one who can take videos without your hands shaking." Andrew smiled, trying not to show how deeply that meant to him. "I wouldn't miss it," he said. She nodded, and without another word, gently closed the door behind him. As he walked down the street, hands in his pockets and heart full in a way it hadn't been in years, Andrew realized something. He wasn't trying to fix the past anymore. He was simply living the present. And for the first time in his life, that was more than enough. The day of the school play arrived on an unusually warm Friday afternoon. The air buzzed with the kind of energy only a gymnasium full of children, parents, and undercaffeinated teachers could create. Andrew sat near the front, his tie slightly loosened and his camera resting on his knee, already recording although the performance hadn't started yet. Marina sat beside him, her hand resting quietly on the bench between them, close but not quite touching his. Around them, the hum of nervous parents and excited children filled the room, but Andrew barely noticed. His eyes were on the small curtain at the side of the makeshift stage, waiting for the moment when two identical red-haired girls would peek their heads out to scan the audience. He knew they would be looking for him. Sure enough, a small hand moved the curtain just enough for Emmy's eyes to appear. She saw him and grinned wide enough for the entire row to see. Then Lily's head popped up next to hers, and she waved so enthusiastically the curtain nearly fell down. Andrew waved back, heart full. It was a small thing, maybe, to the rest of the world. But to him, it felt like everything he'd worked toward had been leading to this moment. Not the boardrooms or hotel openings or awards, this. The lights dimmed, and the play began, a chaotic and charming retelling of a fairy tale that somehow included pirates, talking trees, and a time machine. Emmy delivered her lines with perfect clarity and an exaggerated bow that made half the room laugh. Lily played a forest guide and spent most of her scenes pointing in the wrong direction, then correcting herself with a giggle. Andrew recorded every second. Marina occasionally leaned toward him, whispering commentary, and he responded with quiet laughter, never taking his eyes off the girls. After the performance, parents flooded the hallway outside the auditorium, congratulating their children and snapping photos. Emmy and Lily ran straight into Andrew's arms, still in costume, breathless with pride. "Did you see?" Emmy asked, cheeks flushed. "We remembered every word." Lily tugged at his jacket and said, "And you didn't even miss it. You were really there." Andrew crouched to their level and hugged them tightly. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," he said. And he meant every word. Later that evening, back at Marina's apartment, the girls had fallen asleep on the couch, still in their dresses, with cupcake frosting on their chins and stars painted on their cheeks. Andrew and Marina sat in the kitchen, the soft glow of a single lamp between them. She poured him a glass of wine without asking, and he accepted it with a quiet nod. There wasn't much to say. The night had already said it all. Still, after a while, she asked, "Do you think you're ready?" He looked at her, not sure if she meant for something specific or just in general. "Ready for what?" he asked gently. She shrugged, eyes warm but serious. "For being in this. For staying." He didn't answer right away. He stood, walked into the living room, and gently picked up the drawing Emmy had left on the table earlier. It was a new one, this time with all four of them holding hands beneath a crooked sun. At the top, in uneven letters, it read, "Our family." He turned back to Marina, holding the paper. "I don't think it's about being ready anymore," he said. "It's about wanting to be here. Choosing it. Every day." She studied him, then smiled, that soft, familiar curve of her lips that he'd once known better than his own reflection. She didn't need to say anything. The answer was already in her eyes. As the evening deepened and the apartment filled with the quiet sound of breathing children and cooling tea, Andrew felt the final piece of his life settle into place. This wasn't the future he'd imagined back when his goals were spreadsheets and skyscrapers. It was better. It was real. And it was his. The ending of this story feels like a quiet triumph, one that doesn't need fireworks to feel powerful. What resonates most is how healing unfolds not through dramatic declarations but through everyday moments, school plays, shared drawings, whispered bedtime promises. Andrew's transformation is sincere because it isn't sudden. It's earned. It's layered. And it's grounded in presence, which is so often more meaningful than words. What I love most is that the story doesn't pretend everything is perfect. It acknowledges the pain, the lost time, the mistakes. But it chooses hope anyway. The past isn't rewritten, it's reconnected to something better. The girls don't just gain a father. They gain a man who wants to learn how to love them in the way they deserve. And Marina, without losing her strength, finally lets herself trust again. It's not a fantasy. It's what happens when someone truly shows up, and stays.